Hey folks, what's up? I'm James, and today we're diving deep into a story that perfectly illustrates why the economic crisis of 2025 is tearing families apart. This isn't a story about betrayal or cheating. It's not about someone giving up too easily. It's about loyalty, hard work, and how even two people giving their all sometimes just isn't enough anymore. So grab a coffee, sit back, and let's get into it. Mark and Lisa were both in their early 30s living in a high-cost city. They'd been married for 6 years, and together they had two young kids. A lot of you might relate to this, juggling work, family, and the everyday stresses of life. They were like any other hardworking couple, doing what they thought was best for their family. Mark worked long shifts as a delivery driver. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills. Lisa managed a retail store, working her way up the ladder after years of dedication. They didn't live lavishly. There were no fancy vacations or new cars. It was just groceries, rent, daycare fees, the basics. But as life went on, the basics became more and more expensive. The rent kept going up. Groceries were getting more expensive, and they had no control over it. The constant pressure of living paycheck to paycheck was becoming overwhelming. Their days were a blur. Mark would wake up before sunrise to deliver packages all over the city. Lisa would get up early too, to get the kids ready for daycare, and then head to her store to work late into the night. They'd pass each other like ships in the night. Their relationship, once full of laughter, dreams, and romance, now felt like a distant memory. There were no long conversations about their hopes for the future, no lazy weekend mornings spent together. They were too exhausted. They weren't talking about their dreams. They were talking about survival. They barely had time to connect with each other, and when they did, the exhaustion was so overwhelming that it felt like they were just going through the motions. Mark would come home after a long shift, barely able to keep his eyes open, and Lisa would be working late into the night, finishing her tasks and trying to manage everything at home. They'd eat dinner in silence, both too tired to really talk, and then go to bed just to wake up the next day and do it all over again. There was no time for anything else, no time to laugh, no time for romance, and certainly no time to dream about the future. And it wasn't just about being tired. The financial strain was starting to tear them apart. They were constantly arguing. Little things would trigger huge fights. Should they cancel the kids' extracurricular activities to save money? Could they afford new winter coats for the kids this year? How much could they cut back on groceries without it being obvious? Their arguments weren't about the kids or family decisions anymore. They were about money. How much money they had, how much they didn't have, and how they could stretch their dollars to make it through the month. Mark started picking up weekend shifts for a courier service. Lisa began tutoring online at night. They were working more than ever, but it wasn't enough. The rising costs of living kept outpacing them, like a cruel race they could never win. They would come home after a long day of work and just collapse into bed, too exhausted to even talk to each other about their day. And when they did talk, it was always about money, about how little they had, about how much they owed. There was no room for anything else. They started feeling more like roommates and partners. Their once deep emotional connection had been replaced by financial conversations. Did you pay the rent? How much was the electric bill? Can you cut back on this or that to make sure we can make ends meet? There was no longer any warmth in their conversations. They weren't partners fighting through hard times anymore. They were two people just trying to survive. And one night, Mark sat down and said to Lisa, "I miss us." He was talking about the days when they used to dream together, when they used to laugh, when they were happy. And Lisa just cried. She knew exactly what he meant. They both missed the life they once had, but no matter how hard they worked, it wasn't enough. They couldn't see a way out. Eventually, they both realized something had to give. Their relationship wasn't failing because they didn't love each other anymore. It wasn't because they had stopped caring. It was because they had nothing left to give. They had worked so hard for so long, and yet it still wasn't enough. They weren't quitting because they didn't love each other. They were quitting because the stress of surviving was taking more than they had to give. And so, after a long conversation, they made the decision to separate. They both cried. It wasn't because they didn't care. It was because they had fought for so long and had nothing left. They'd reached the point where the economic pressure had taken an irreversible toll on their marriage. They loved each other, but they couldn't keep sacrificing their emotional well-being just to survive. You might be thinking, how could this happen? How does a couple like this, who loves each other and works hard, end up separated? Well, here's the thing. In 2025, prices exploded faster than wages could keep up. The cost of housing, food, childcare, everything went up. But the wages, they stayed the same. People like Mark and Lisa, who were working harder than ever before, were being pushed to their limits. No one tells you how to survive when the economy stops rewarding hard work. It's not about being lazy or not trying hard enough. It's about an economic system that leaves people struggling to survive. No matter how much effort they put in the end, it's not just about the money. It's about dignity. It's about feeling like no matter how much you give, the system keeps moving the goalposts further and further. And when you can't catch up, when you're just barely hanging on, it eats away at you. It wears you down emotionally. It wears you down physically. And as we saw with Mark and Lisa, it wears down the very foundation of a marriage. So what can we do in a world like this? What can we learn from Mark and Lisa's story? First, you have to talk about money. Don't hide it. Don't avoid the hard conversations. Communicate openly with your partner about finances. Share the burden. Don't let it build up until it becomes too much to handle. Second, build emotional resilience. Work on supporting each other emotionally, not just financially. It's easy to get caught up in the grind of survival, but you can't forget about your emotional well-being. Third, get creative. Look for side hustles. Invest in new skills. It's hard, but sometimes a change in perspective can make all the difference. Fourth, don't be afraid to ask for help. Financial counselors, marriage therapists, community groups, these resources can help you weather the storm. You are not alone. Most importantly, remember that your partner is not the enemy. The system that makes survival a constant battle is the real enemy. Mark and Lisa's story is heartbreaking, but it's also a wake-up call. We can't keep pretending that hard work is always enough. We need to start addressing the bigger issues that are causing families to break apart. If this story resonated with you, or if you're living through something similar, know that you're not alone. Drop your thoughts or your own story in the comments. Let's build a community that lifts each other up. Hit like, smash subscribe, and let's keep these important conversations going. Stay strong, folks. I'll see you in the next video.